The restaurant glimmered like a secret too elegant to confess. Crystal light spilled across polished silver, every reflection rehearsed, every smile a disguise. At table 9, Lucas Harlow, billionaire CEO, lifted his glass to celebrate the merger that crowned his empire. Success had a flavor tonight: oak, pride, and vintage red. But before the rim touched his lips, he noticed it. A folded napkin beneath his hand, 4 words scribbled in trembling ink. "Don't drink. Leave now." He looked up. The waitress stood motionless, dark skin glowing under gold light, eyes sharp and terrified. No sound, no movement, only that gaze, steady and pleading. The room around them kept laughing, clinking, unaware that death had already taken a seat. And in that suspended silence, Lucas realized the warning wasn't about the wine. It was about him. Would you save the man who ruined your life, if his death could finally set you free? Layla Moore had the kind of beauty that life tried to weather, but never could erase. Her skin carried the deep tone of midnight warmth, her eyes the quiet resilience of someone who had learned too early that grace is sometimes the only armor left. Every morning before dawn, she tied her curls into a knot, kissed her sleeping son's forehead, and stepped into a city that never remembered her name. She was 32, a single mother, a woman who once dreamed of becoming a pharmacologist, before grief, debt, and time turned her life into a series of survival shifts. Now she wore the black uniform of the Marlowe, a restaurant that fed the powerful and forgot the poor. Her shoes pinched. Her wrists ached from carrying plates heavier than her paychecks, but her back never bent. Not once. When the other waitresses whispered about rich men and easy tips, Layla stayed silent. She didn't believe in luck. Not anymore. She believed in precision, angles, timing, observation. Old habits from the days when she studied chemical compounds still lived in her hands. Even in this place of glass and gold, her eyes saw what others didn't. The film of residue on a wine glass, the wrong reflection in a decanter, the faint discoloration that spoke of contamination. Some nights, after closing, she would walk home along the river, streetlights flickering against the water like broken promises. In her purse, she carried 2 things: a photograph of a man smiling in a factory uniform, and a small silver ring with scorch marks around the edges. Her husband, Jerome, had been a maintenance engineer at Harlow Biochem, the same empire whose CEO now dined under her service. 3 years ago, a containment valve failed. The company called it an accident. The insurance called it pending review. By the time the reports were buried, Jerome was buried too. Layla never forgot the signature at the bottom of those documents. Lucas Harlow, written in sleek black ink. He never knew her name, but she had learned his handwriting by heart. She didn't plan revenge. She didn't have the luxury for that. All she wanted was stability, for Malik to grow up untouched by the cruelty that shaped her. Yet fate has a strange sense of irony, because on the night when Layla Moore least expected it, the man who once signed her husband's death warrant would sit at her table, and she would be the only thing standing between him and his own. Before she ever wore the black uniform of the Marlowe, Layla Moore wore a white lab coat that smelled faintly of ethanol and ambition. She had been 22 then, studying pharmaceutical chemistry on a partial scholarship, spending her nights memorizing formulas and her mornings serving coffee to professors who never remembered her face. Jerome used to wait outside the campus gates, engine rumbling in an old blue pickup that coughed like it had asthma. He would lean against the door, smile wide enough to fill the whole street and say, "Come on, Doc, even geniuses need to eat." They married under a tree behind the university, just the 2 of them and a borrowed guitar. It was the kind of love built quietly, stronger than dreams, softer than time. When Layla got pregnant with Malik, Jerome took the night shift at Harlow Biochem, a job that promised benefits and stability. He called it their bridge to a better life. But bridges burn easily when built on lies. The night the sirens wailed, Layla was in their kitchen, reviewing flashcards, while Malik slept in a basket beside her. At first, she thought it was thunder. Then came the call. Static. Screams. A voice from the plant saying there'd been an explosion in the containment wing. She ran barefoot into the rain, clutching her son, chasing the smoke that rose over the skyline like a bruise spreading across the night. The next morning, the air smelled of bleach and sorrow. They told her Jerome had been in Section 4, right next to the chemical disposal line. No one survived. All they gave her was his wedding band, warped and burned. The company offered condolences in printed envelopes. Harlow Biochem released a statement about unforeseen malfunctions, and at the bottom of the insurance denial letter was the same name, typed in calm authority. Lucas Harlow, Chief Operating Officer. Layla had stared at it until her vision blurred, a signature so clean, so certain, as if a man could reduce a life to policy language. That night, she pressed her forehead against Malik's tiny hand and whispered, "I'll never let you grow up invisible like us." But invisibility was the only way she could survive. Her scholarship vanished when the medical bills came. She sold their furniture piece by piece, applied for any job that didn't ask too many questions. When the Marlowe hired her as a waitress, she told herself it was temporary, just until Malik started school, just until she could breathe again. But grief has a way of becoming routine. Still, Layla kept one secret alive. Before the plant shut down, Jerome had copied digital maintenance records onto a flash drive. Files he said might one day make them listen. She never opened it. She couldn't bear to. Until the night she saw a familiar face on the television screen. Lucas Harlow, newly appointed CEO of Harlow Biochem, standing before cameras, smiling about innovation and safety. Layla turned off the TV, her stomach hollow with something colder than anger. She tucked the flash drive inside a small tin box, hidden behind Malik's birth certificate. She didn't know why she kept it. Proof, maybe, that truth once existed before it was buried under wealth. Years later, when she carried wine through the mirrored halls of the Marlowe, she noticed a new label in the cellar, an exclusive batch, delivered under Harlow's name, imported from his private vineyard, sealed by his research division. The same research division once overseen by Dr. Malcolm Crane, the man who supervised Jerome's shift the night he died. The scent of that bottle was faintly wrong, bitter where it should have been sweet. A chemical note she recognized from memory, sharp and sterile beneath the perfume of grapes. In that moment, the years folded. The factory sirens, the denial letters, the burned ring. All of it returned in a single breath. It wasn't coincidence. Someone had poisoned that wine. And fate, cruel and deliberate, had chosen her, the widow of a man destroyed by Harlow Biochem, to be the one holding the tray. Layla's pulse steadied, because when she saw that faint shimmer at the bottom of the CEO's glass, she understood something the world around her didn't. History wasn't repeating itself. It was asking her what she'd do this time. The Marlowe pulsed with the quiet hum of power that only the wealthy recognize as music. Waiters moved like shadows between tables, their smiles precise, their words rehearsed. In the corner, a jazz trio played a song older than regret. Layla moved through it all, silent, graceful, invisible by design. That night, Table 9 belonged to Lucas Harlow. He arrived with 2 board members and a woman who laughed too quickly, the kind of laughter that cost something. His suit was navy, tailored to perfection. He didn't look like guilt or danger. He looked like success, the kind that buys silence in bulk. Layla set the menus down her hand steady though her stomach turned. "Good evening," she said softly. No sign of recognition in his eyes. Why would there be? To him, she was just another uniform. When she poured the first glass of water, one of the executives smirked. "Do you ever get tired of serving rich people?" he asked. Layla smiled faintly. "Only when they forget how to say thank you." The table chuckled, except Lucas. His gaze flicked to her, sharp, assessing. There was something about her poise, her diction, that didn't fit the stereotype he carried in his head. He asked, almost lazily, "What's your name?" "Layla," she replied. "Layla," he repeated, testing it, as though her name were a word he'd never had to pronounce before. Then, with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes, he added, "Pretty name. You should smile more." It wasn't the words. She'd heard worse. It was the tone, the dismissive ease of a man who had forgotten the taste of humility. Layla's jaw tightened. "I smile when there's something worth smiling for, sir." A flicker crossed his face, surprise, maybe even respect, before it disappeared under the smooth mask of power. The other men laughed to ease the tension. To them, it was banter. To Layla, it was a test. The bottle arrived moments later, escorted by the sommelier, an imported Bordeaux, private label, vintage of Harlow Vineyards. Layla reached for the bottle, and the air changed. The faintest whiff, something metallic beneath the oak and cherry. It was there, subtle, but wrong. She tilted the bottle under the chandelier light. For an instant, a shimmer at the bottom caught her eye. Almost invisible. Almost. Her breath slowed. Her training returned. It wasn't wine dust or sediment. It was chemical. Fine, crystalline, meant to dissolve quickly. Layla had seen that texture once before, in the lab, years ago, when a careless intern spilled H47 compound across a steel counter. She froze. Her pulse thundered in her ears. If she said something now, the sommelier would panic, the board members would call security, and Lucas Harlow would never believe her. But if she stayed silent, the man who had taken everything from her would die before dessert. The thought lingered longer than it should have. "Justice," whispered a voice she didn't recognize. Or maybe vengeance. Either way, it would be quiet, poetic, clean. Then, she thought of Malik, asleep in their small apartment, breathing softly, his schoolbook tucked under one arm. What would he see in her eyes if he ever learned she'd chosen silence? Her decision came like a breath leaving her body. She slipped the napkin under his glass, her handwriting small but urgent. "Don't drink. Leave now." Then she stepped back, spine straight, tray steady. The note looked like nothing at all. But her eyes betrayed everything. Lucas lifted the glass, saw the folded corner, read the words. His gaze snapped up to hers. Confusion first, then disbelief. For a moment, they were the only two people in the room. Music played, laughter echoed, and under it all, a current of dread passed between them. He didn't move at first. Then, without a word, he stood. The chair scraped softly against marble, a sound small enough to vanish beneath conversation. He left the table, murmuring something about a call. The other guests barely noticed, but Layla did. She exhaled, her hands trembling for the first time that night. Minutes later, security swept the floor. The wine glass was taken, the bottle sealed. Whispers rippled through the restaurant. Someone had called in a threat. Someone had fainted. The story would change a dozen times before morning. When the chaos subsided, Layla stood alone near the service hall, the dim lights humming overhead. Her supervisor approached, frowning. "What happened at table 9? "Nothing," she lied. Because how could she explain that she had just saved the life of the man who destroyed hers? In the reflection of the glass door, she saw herself. The uniform, the tired eyes, the quiet strength that refused to break. For the first time, she felt something she hadn't in years. Not anger, not even peace. It was power, the kind that comes from knowing you could have chosen hate, but didn't. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Inside, Layla Moore stood still, her tray pressed against her chest, and whispered to no one. History doesn't decide who we are. Choices do. The next morning, the Marlowe was quieter than usual, that kind of silence that follows scandal. Layla arrived early, still hoping it had all been a misunderstanding. But the moment she stepped through the back door, her manager was waiting. "Layla, we need to talk." Two men in plain suits stood beside him, corporate security. Their faces were polite, but their eyes were already guilty of her. They asked about the wine, about the note, about how she knew to warn him. Layla answered truthfully, every word simple, steady. But the truth doesn't matter when the story's already written. To them, she was the suspicious waitress, the black woman who must have known something. By afternoon, her apron was folded on the counter. Administrative suspension pending investigation. No paycheck, no shifts, no rent. She packed her things in silence, walked out through the alley where last night's glittering laughter had turned to whispers. The cold air stung. The city lights blinked like judgment. That night, Malik waited by the window, tracing stars on the fogged glass with his finger. "Mom, do they say when you can go back?" Layla smiled, small and tired. "Soon, baby. It's just a mix-up." He nodded, believing her, because children always do, until they don't. When he fell asleep, she sat beside the bed, staring at the floor. Bills, rent, medicine, food. Every number on every paper felt like a countdown. She wanted to scream, to hate, to let bitterness finally swallow the ache she'd carried for years. But then, her eyes caught the small drawing taped to the wall. Malik's crayon picture of the two of them standing under a big yellow sun. Underneath, in crooked letters, he had written, "Me and Mom. Safe." Layla pressed her palm against her mouth, trying not to cry. Safe. Such a small word for something the world rarely gave them. She opened the drawer and took out the tin box. Inside, the old flash drive gleamed faintly in the lamplight. Jerome's last secret, the one she'd buried with her grief. She hesitated, then whispered, "You wanted them to listen, didn't you?" Her laptop flickered to life. Files appeared, maintenance reports, toxicology notes, emails signed by Dr. Malcolm Crane. And there, buried deep, a list of unauthorized chemical shipments. One matched the code on the wine invoice. Layla stared at the screen, realization tightening around her chest. This wasn't over. Maybe fate hadn't chosen her by accident. Maybe it was giving her one more chance. Not to destroy, but to expose. She closed the laptop, exhaled, and whispered, "For you, Jerome. For us." 2 days later, the rain came like a confession the city didn't want to make. Layla stood at the corner of 5th and Reading, waiting for the bus that never seemed to arrive, her coat soaked, her mind burning. In her pocket, a flash drive that could unravel everything. In her heart, a question she wasn't ready to answer. Would he even listen? She didn't have to wonder long. A black car slowed beside her, windows tinted, engine humming like a warning. When it stopped, the door opened, and Lucas Harlow stepped out. No chauffeur this time, no board members, no mask of confidence, just a man with dark circles under his eyes, and a voice that had forgotten how to sound sure. "Ms. Moore," he said, "get in." For a moment, she thought about walking away. But Malik's face flashed in her mind. The drawing on the wall, the word safe. She got in. The ride was quiet, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Finally, Lucas broke the silence. They found the same compound in that bottle, H47. I didn't even know it existed. Layla's voice was steady. You did once. You just didn't look close enough. He glanced at her, eyes narrowing. You sound like you know more than the police. She met his gaze without fear. Because I do. Then she handed him the flash drive. He didn't take it right away. What's on it? Proof, she said. Proof that your vice president, Malcolm Crane, has been smuggling your old research compounds into new product lines. He's killing people in slow motion, the same way my husband died. His expression shifted. Disbelief, guilt, something deeper. My husband worked for you, she continued. Jerome Moore, Section 4. The night he died. You signed the safety waiver that let Crane cut maintenance costs. She paused. You probably don't remember. But I do. Lucas looked like the air had been pulled out of him. The car stopped outside a high-rise downtown. His building, his empire. He whispered, almost to himself. I signed hundreds of documents that year. Layla's reply was quiet, cold. Some of them had names attached. Inside the office, the world looked different. No chandeliers, no music, just fluorescent light and the hum of machines that didn't sleep. Lucas plugged the flash drive into his computer. Files opened like wounds, emails, formulas, shipment orders. And at the bottom of every page, Dr. Malcolm Crane's signature. What's this? Lucas muttered. Layla leaned in. That's the truth you buried under profit margins. He read in silence. The color draining from his face. Then came the message thread. Crane's private correspondence. One line stood out. Ensure the CEO's glass is the only one treated. After tonight, Harlow Biochem will need new leadership. Lucas's hands trembled. He tried to kill me. Layla's voice cut through the air. He already did. Years ago. You just didn't die with the rest of us. He looked at her then. Really looked. Not as a waitress, not as a statistic, but as a woman who had seen more truth than he ever could from his penthouse view. You saved me, he said softly. After everything Don't thank me, she interrupted. I didn't do it for you. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain against the window sounded like applause from ghosts. Lucas turned to her. Help me end this. Publicly. Layla's eyes flickered. You think anyone will believe you now? They don't have to believe me, he said. They just need to see him. The next morning, the press conference was scheduled. Crane stood at the podium, calm, rehearsed, his voice dripping with confidence. He spoke of innovation, growth, legacy. Behind him, Lucas entered quietly, followed by Layla. The crowd stirred. Cameras clicked. Lucas stepped to the microphone. There's something I need to say before we celebrate this company's future, he began. Someone here tried to rewrite that future with poison. Gasps rippled through the room. Crane stiffened. Lucas continued. Steady now. 3 years ago, I signed off on cost cuts that killed good men and women. Their families received silence. Their names were buried under legal clauses. One of those names was Jerome Moore. He turned toward Layla. His widow saved my life 2 nights ago. The room froze. Every flashbulb turned toward her. Lucas lifted the flash drive. This, he said, is what our silence created. He pressed play on the projector. Crane's emails appeared for all to see. The evidence was undeniable. Crane's mask shattered. He tried to speak, but the noise drowned him out. Security moved. Reporters shouted. And through it all, Layla stood still, watching a man fall the way her husband once did. Only this time, justice caught him before the ground did. Later, in the emptied room, Lucas turned to her. I can't undo what I've done. No, she said, but you can stop pretending it wasn't you. He nodded slowly. Then let me try. Outside, the rain had stopped. The first light of morning slid across the skyline, sharp, forgiving, unafraid. And in that fragile dawn, for the first time, neither of them looked away. Weeks passed. The world did what it always does, moved on, half interested, half amused. News anchors called it the biochem scandal. Investors called it a crisis. But for Layla Moore, it was something quieter. The first breath after years of drowning. The charges against Malcolm Crane grew louder by the hour. His empire collapsed under the weight of his own arrogance. Lucas Harlow, once untouchable, was forced to face a public that demanded more than apologies. He didn't hide. He resigned. Instead of defending his wealth, he used it, creating a restitution fund for the families whose lives had been destroyed by the company's neglect. The first check delivered was to Layla Moore. She refused it. "I don't want your money," she told him, her voice calm, her eyes steady. "I want to see what you'll do with it." And he did. He funded a new independent lab, staffed by the families of those affected, led by the same woman who once served him wine. He called it the Jerome Foundation, after the man whose name had haunted both their lives. When Layla entered the building for the first time, she didn't wear a uniform. She wore her old white lab coat, the one that still smelled faintly of ethanol and memory. On the wall, a plaque read, "Dedicated to those who listened when the world refused to hear." That night, she walked home with Malik's hand in hers. The boy was growing fast, bright, curious, asking 1,000 questions about stars and chemicals and whether justice always wins. Layla smiled softly. "Not always," she said, "but it learns." They reached their small apartment, the same one that once echoed with worry. Now it felt lighter. She looked at the table, the flash drive still resting there, now empty. She didn't need it anymore. Across the city, Lucas Harlow stood alone in his glass tower, gazing down at the lights. No board meetings, no headlines, just silence. For the first time, he understood what silence really cost. He poured himself a glass of water, not wine, and raised it slightly toward the skyline. "To the ones who listened," he whispered. And somewhere beyond the glass, in the rhythm of the city, it almost felt like she heard him. Later that week, he visited the lab quietly. Layla didn't expect him, but she didn't send him away either. They walked among microscopes and sterile lights, speaking in low tones about ethics, about legacy, about what survival turns people into. He stopped at the door before leaving. "I used to think power meant control," he said. "Now I think it means accountability." Layla nodded. "Control breaks. Accountability rebuilds." He gave a faint smile. "You always see things clearly, don't you?" "Not always," she replied. "Just when I stop looking for myself." Outside, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, spilling gold across the windows. The same color as that night at the Marlowe, but this time it wasn't artificial. It was real. Malik waited by the front steps, holding a paper star he'd made at school. He ran to her, laughing, his voice bright against the hum of traffic. "Mom, look! I named it after Dad." Layla knelt down, taking the fragile star in her hands. In its uneven edges, she saw every reason she had ever chosen mercy over hate. She whispered, "He'd like that." The camera of the mind pulls back. The mother and son standing in the sunlight, the city alive behind them, the echoes of injustice finally quiet. Some debts aren't paid in money, but in truth. And some forgiveness begins the moment you decide not to let hate drink first. Fade out. Piano fades to silence. Justice at last breathes.